Namaste. Welcome to Bharat Vichar. I'm your host, Balaji Subramanian. Today, I'm very much delighted to have Dr. Bill Warner, one of the world's foremost experts on political Islam. Dr. Warner, welcome to Bharat Vichar.
Glad to be here. We're going to discuss my favorite topic, political Islam.
Yes, sir. But before I do that, the first question that I'm going to ask you is that you were born in 1940. You grew up in the 1950s and 60s, which were considered the golden period of America, a time of some social changes, great upheavals, but also breakthroughs in science and technology. So what was it like growing up in the 50s as a teenager and then in the 60s as an adult for you?
Well, of course, I didn't know anything other than I lived in a very small village of about 200 people. You had to drive many miles to find even a traffic light. So I grew up in a very isolated part of America. And I didn't know there was anything else but that. I mean, we saw the outside world in cities and newspapers. But one of the things that was true about America in those days was, as a matter of fact, in the village that I grew up in, part of becoming a man was to be able to take a joke. And so that you could be insulted, not in a mean, vicious way, but just in a sort of humorous way. We were trained to be tough. Now and then we teach our children to be sensitive. And we also teach our children that the thing that happens if you get upset, that's okay. When I grew up, you didn't want to get upset during a fight because once you got angry, you lost the fight, which, by the way, is the big difference between Islam. In Islam, getting angry is perfectly acceptable. Why? Because Muhammad frequently got angry. So, but I grew up in a country, the country that I'm living in today is not at all like the country that I was born into. And one of those key things is censorship. And we're now getting to the point of the worst kind of censorship is self-censorship. And that's the kind of censorship we're getting ourselves into now. I mean, people call me all kinds of names, racist, hater, bigot, Islamophobe, but I don't care, because I was told, there was a little nurseryhood rhyme we were taught as children: sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never hurt me. And so you call me names, I'm like, whatever, I don't care. But now then our children are raised to leave the room crying if their feelings get hurt. And logic becomes not a matter of what I call logic, which is fact-based reasoning, but an appeal to sympathy for the minority group you're currently supporting. So racism in America no longer means hating someone because of their race. It means offending someone. What you say may be true, but that's not important. What's important is we have a list of minority groups now in America, and if you hurt their feelings with something that is true, then you're a racist. So the term racist has lost its real meaning. So I'll repeat this again. The country that I live in now is very different. If 9/11, September 11, 2001, had happened in the 1800s, the results for Islam would have been totally different. But instead, the Muslims played 9/11 as a sympathy thing. Oh, we're the real victims. My wife got her hijab stared at in the checkout line at the Target store. So it's a very different nation. And I must say I miss it, because even in an area where free speech was used politically, I was raised by my grandmother, who she told you what she thought no matter what. And she passed that on to me, and it has caused me both some fame and some enemies. But I only got one story, the one I tell you. I don't have another one in the back of my head. Very different country. But I'm continuing to speak out for what I think is the truth and what I find out to be the facts. Somebody's got to do the job.
Well, as long as you're not hurting anyone, you have every right to speak your mind. And grandmothers can be tough. I was fortunate enough to have to live with my grandmother till the age of 14. In India, parents live with their children. And she gave me some wonderful values, old-fashioned values. Don't crib. Just, persevere. Perseverance was the key for them. And they had nothing in India. They had nothing. And I'm sure your grandparents also had nothing. And imagine at the height of the depression, your parents would have been grew up during the height of depression. So they had nothing, and they just worked hard and
I was taught the virtue of hard work.
Yes, sir. Now, my next question to you is this. We'll come to the political Islam, but right now I feel that America and India and France are perhaps the only three countries where democracy is functioning, where someone is standing up to someone. In America, maybe things might change in 4 years' time, but in India and France, someone is standing up to them. So my next question to you is this. Do you think the liberal majority has taken over the American educational institutions, and instead of creating thinkers, they are creating followers?
I agree. Only we need, in America, it's not, we say it's not the liberals doing that. Political shading is different from country to country. What we say here is the left is doing that. They have infiltrated the churches, the synagogues, the education system. And once you take over the education system, you've really taken the backbone out of the society. So what our problems are now is from the left, or what we call the left. I've learned, and it's a form of Marxism, because I've learned that in Europe, the term left has a slightly different meaning than it does in America.
Even in India?
But, I'm sure it's different. As a matter of fact, a good friend of mine is Vijay Kumar. His father was a communist, but he said the left in India had very high moral values. He said the left in America has very sleazy values, particularly when it comes to family and sex.
How deeply do you think the press in the US is now divided / compromised?
I have never seen America so divided. The whole business is run on anger. I see senators now saying things that I am appalled. And I wouldn't say that if I were in a group of men, and yet they say it in public. So insults are common, put downs are common. Now, of course, politics has always been a rough game, but at the same time, I've never seen it to be so bitter and hateful. As a matter of fact, you mentioned, I was talking earlier, I grew up not only in the 40s and the 50s, but in the 60s. In the 60s, I took part in civil rights movement. But we were nonviolent. What we see today are the protests are very violent. We didn't burn cars. We marched with signs and handed out brochures. So it's a very different political country we live in now.
Must have been quite a scene marching with Martin Luther King. I mean, what he managed to accomplish in those 10 years' time from 1955 to 1969 when he was shot was something quite amazing. Martin Luther King and all those other, icons of civil rights, and all the people from America, across America, from North and from the South, where segregation was followed, must have been quite a sight to actually, and quite an experience. I can't even begin to comprehend. Anyway, now we're going to come to your favorite topic. The first question to me with regards to political Islam is that why reason over text never took shape in Islam? Whenever someone tried to have reason over text in Islam, there have been Muslims, it has been recorded, they were stomped out. Why that never happened? Why reason never triumphed over text in Islam?
Repeat the question again. I'm not surely, I don't really grasp the essence of it.
In Islam, reason over text never really took shape.
Yes, I agree.
Why is that?
Well, because if you read it was Al-Ghazali who published the death stroke of Islamic thought. When you read the Quran, Allah does everything. Allah is so involved that what Muslims say is there can be no natural laws, because if there were natural laws, it would chain the hand of Allah. He couldn't do what he wanted to do. That is, everything is on the whim of Allah. So therefore, you can't have cause and effect, because Allah is the cause of everything. Once you don't have cause and effect, and once you don't have fact-based reasoning, and you don't have natural laws, you cannot have science. thing is with Islam is it's in a box intellectually. All the answers have to come from the Quran, the Sirah, and the Hadith. The Sirah is Muhammad's biography, and the Hadith are his traditions. So all the answers you can use are found in those three books. Well, there's a lot that those three books don't cover. We can see this, for instance, in the fact that the economic output of Spain is equal to that of the entire Arab world and the Middle East without oil. We also see that Nobel Prizes are few and far between inside of Islam. And the reason is everything is in that small box. Christians, I know, I was raised a Christian, are taught in reasoning, what we would call Socratic reasoning. Or I'm sorry, that's not the philosopher I want. It's not Socrates, it's Aristotle. So we have a different intellectual basis. We have two civilizations here. We have one civilization that does not have a golden rule. We have a civilization which does not recognize cause and effect. Our civilization at its best is based on what I call the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And the logic is based on Aristotelian logic. So our civilization has a different intellectual foundation and a different ethical foundation. This is the reason that there are two separate civilizations. And there's no place in between them. You can't sit between two stools. Now, of course, what we like to hear about is the forms of Islam that people like, which they call modern Islam. But modern Islam is simply Islam with the violence taken out. So there's no room in Islam for real thought. And when we see this in terms of Muslims themselves, they generally know very little about the doctrine of Islam. They just know how to memorize certain things which may not even make any sense to them. So Islam is a totally separate civilization, and we use different reasoning, and therefore we have different civilizations. The golden rule is what allowed America to eliminate slavery, because when the nation was first formed, slavery was allowed. But nobody wants to be a slave, and so therefore the Constitution was changed to prohibit slavery. So the use of the golden rule, that is treating human beings equal to yourself, produces a wonderful civilization. But in Islam, the civilization, there's no humanity. What we have are kafirs, non-believers, and Muslims. And the kafir is totally separated from the Muslim. That is the reason I call what I call political Islam. It's the part of Islam that affects the non-Muslim. What's amazing is that when you look at the text in the Quran, the Sirah, and the Hadith, the majority of those texts are about what to do about about the kafir, which is interesting. I read Buddhist sutras, for instance, and they're about how to be a better Buddhist. They don't spend all their time condemning non-Buddhists. So we see we're dealing with a different civilization based on reasoning and based on morals and ethics, and there is no bridge between them. Now, the Muslims in America like to talk about bridge building, and they do like to build bridges, but the traffic only moves in one direction. They're never wrong, and the Christians who show up are spineless people by and large, and they won't stand up for their own beliefs.
You recently sorry, continue. Sorry.
Go ahead.
No, you recently shared an article where you talked about ghettoization, if I pronounced it correctly,
Yes.
in America. If you could just elaborate on that.
Well, ghetto is a word that comes out of Germany, where the Jews lived in their special parts of town. But now the term has become useful to talk about Muslims, because Muslims, look, I'm a kafir, I'm filthy, all right? Allah hates me. How do I know this? The Quran tells me this. So why would a Muslim want to be intimate and close to a filthy person whom Allah hates? So what we find in America is that a large Islamic mosque will be built, and pretty soon the real estate around it becomes all Muslim, because the kafirs are treated rudely or in a standoffish kind of way, made to feel they're not welcome. So we find that Muslims want to create their own, what I call ghetto. They feel more comfortable there because they can have more Sharia. And Sharia is the dividing line here, because I don't want to live anything under Sharia. Why would I like Sharia? Sharia says that I'm a kafir. I can be fought against in jihad. I can be enslaved. Our women can be raped. So those are the aspects of being a Muslim living next to a kafir. The kafir's made to feel unwanted. And I'm sure, do you see the same thing in India? That is, neighborhoods will become almost exclusively Muslim.
Yes.
Same thing happens in America.
It happens once the percentage crosses over 30%, say a ratio of 100 to 30, then slowly things change in that particular area. Things start to change. It happens in India all the time. Seen it myself personally. I've lived in the nation's capital, in Delhi, for 35 years. So I'm quite aware of this ghetto mindset, which also gives them the advantage to organize themselves very quickly, because this just happened recently. I'll just segue a bit. There's a place called Nizamuddin, which used to be quite near to my house. A Hindu man married a Muslim girl, consensual, no violation of the law. And immediately dozens came and started, they got violent with the Hindu community living over there. So it has happened. Ghettoization is quite common. There are certain parts of Delhi where I wouldn't go with Patton's Third Army, to be honest. It can be brutal at times. Anyway, thank you for explaining that, because a lot of people in India may not know the true terminology of ghettoization. Now, the next question that I'm going to ask is that when confronted that Islam is aggressive and wants to impose its will on others, the common answer given, or parroted answer, which is given, is that, and I will quote the verse, "For you is your religion, for me is my religion," which basically sounds secular, but in theory, but what would you have to say in practice?
Well, when people say, here's what people think: if you can show me a peaceful Islam, that means the evil Islam does not exist. This is Aristotelian thinking, but Islam does not base its logic on Aristotelian thinking. It has a dualistic logic. Let me show you this dualism in the way of Muhammad's life. He was a missionary for Islam in the town of Mecca for 13 years and converted about 150 people. The Meccans found him to be irritating to live with because he created dissension and fights. So they basically ran him out of town, as we would say in America, and he went to Medina. In Medina, he became a jihadist and a politician. The Sirah, his biography, clearly lays this out in the clearest way possible. But here's what's important. 2 years after he entered Medina, it was free of all Jews. When he moved there, it was half Jewish. And in about 3 years, all of Medina was completely Islamic. When Muhammad died, all of the world that he lived in on what we now call the Arabian Peninsula was Islamic. So therefore, what do we have here? We have two different Muhammads. We have a Muhammad, you have your religion, I have mine, very peaceful, very tolerant. But as soon as they get political strength, they become a different kind of Muslim. They become the Muslim of Medina, not Mecca. And then you're in a world of hurt, because there is no jihad in the Quran of Mecca, but there's nothing but jihad in the Quran of Medina. So therefore we have this, what I call dualism. In the Quran, they call it abrogation, where a later verse abrogates an earlier verse. But abrogation is just a special case of dualism, because we can see dualism in the hadith. Let me give you an example. There are several hadiths about wife beating. There's one hadith about wife beating which says, "Do not strike Allah's handmaidens." That is, don't hit women. But there's another hadith where Muhammad says, "Never ask a man why he beats his wife." Now, which is the hadith? They contradict each other. This is dualism. It's like having hot water and cold water at the sink. You can get whichever one you want. So therefore, proving something is peaceful in Islam does nothing about something evil in Islam, because peace and evil can exist side by side and used when needed. And we also see here that there's almost an invasion plan. When Muslims first come to America, they say, "Oh, we're so delighted to be here. We simply want to come to America and practice our religion. Thank you so much for having us as refugees." But as time goes on and they become stronger, they start making demands. We want halal food in the schools. We want halal food in the prisons. We want time off from work when it's Ramadan. So there are two Islams. There are two Muhammads. There are two Qurans. So therefore, when we hear something peaceful and nice, that does not imply that there is not something evil as well. This is what is so deceptive about Islam. There's a verse in the Quran which says, Allah says that I'm the greatest deceiver. And indeed, I would agree with that. Muhammad was a deceiver. He said he was. He advised deception to those who followed him. A man wrote a poem, and he said, who will kill Ashraf, who has offended Allah and his prophet? I will, Muhammad, but first I'll have to deceive him. May I do so? Yes, deceive him. So that's the reason we have what seems like you have your religion, I have mine, and it does not promise everything, because that's only half the promise.
So basically, when not in power, I think there is an American idiom called play possum.
Yes.
But
exactly.
once there is sufficient strength, then go ahead and achieve your objectives. That's what you are trying to say.
Yes.
Well, sir, the next question that I'm going to ask you is that the Christians gave up crusades some 600, 700 years ago.
Yes.
It became futile. And then the age of enlightenment came. Along with it, many other bad things, which is connected to Christianity, but we don't have to get into that. However, science, reason slowly became a focal point in Western Europe. But the dream of Caliphate still burns bright with Muslims even today. Why is that?
Well, everything in Islam is caused by either Allah or Muhammad. And what we have here, what is the example of leadership that Muhammad left? He didn't leave democracy. Instead, what he left was the strong man rules. And the strong man rules everything, rules religion and rules politics. So the perfect example of there are 89 verses in the Quran which state that every Muslim is to imitate Muhammad in their life. Well, that means imitating him in every way, including this way. So that's basically the reason.
Personally, I find it quite hard to believe, and many experts have said this, that a lot of things got added to the Quran from the original Quran. So it's quite possible what Prophet Muhammad actually tried to say, people changed according to their own convenience. I was listening to one of India's foremost scholars, actually, Arif Muhammad Khan. He's the governor of Kerala, and he's a scholar. He's a brilliant scholar. He actually, I'll just give you a short description of his character. In 1985 or 86, the Supreme Court of India, there was this case called Shabano case, where a 60-odd something year old woman got divorced by her husband, and the Supreme Court said, you have to pay the maintenance to the wife. And suddenly the ulema just raised their hand, and the Rajiv Gandhi government, which had more than 400 seats in the parliament, passed a law that basically disenfranchised Muslim women. And only now, under Prime Minister Narendra Modi, the triple talaq got abolished in India. So Arif Muhammad Khan was the law minister, and he resigned in protest. He's saying that this is wrong. So he's that kind of a leader and a scholar. He's not only an Arabic scholar, he's also a Sanskrit scholar. He's a man of tremendous intellect. And he was saying that, and even other scholars, that a lot of things got added 150, 200 years after the passing of Prophet Muhammad. Would that be were they right? Are they right? Since you are also an expert.
Well, I never examine the Quran alone. I always look and see what Muhammad did and said. So Muhammad was the man we want to look to here. And what we see is that Muhammad in the Sirah, his life runs parallel to that of the Quran. As a matter of fact, when you read the Quran and you know the story of Muhammad, you can see that Muhammad is the cause, Allah is the fact. When Muhammad needed something, Allah was quick to grant him his wishes. So therefore, if I want to straighten out some information about the Quran, I turn to the Sirah and the Hadith. And what they say is it's perfectly fine. That is, you can have this situation where it appears as though things are changed, but since the Sirah and the Quran run parallel to each other and interlace perfectly like a jigsaw puzzle, I reject that argument. I say, if you're going to change if you're going to say the Quran was changed, then you also have to say the Hadith were changed and the Sirah was changed. And now that you have a religion, political system, in which all three of its sacred texts are considered to be false. This also goes in the face of the fact that every Muslim that I've ever met maintains that the Quran is perfect, complete, universal, and eternal. Well, what this scholar is advancing is that Allah has not protected the Quran, but has allowed the Quran to be changed. Well, this is heresy. So no matter which way we cut it, I reject the fact that the Quran has been altered in such a way as to make it bad. The badness came in parallel with what Muhammad's life development was. Remember, it was jihad that brought him success. He was involved in 105 different jihads in his lifetime. So I reject the idea that the Quran has been corrupted. It's been corrupted, but not in the way that this man is talking about. It's corrupted in the same way that all handwritten scripts have errors creep into them. Now, Muslims in America say there's not one word, not one punctuation mark that is out of place in the Quran. So is the Quran perfect or is it not perfect? If it's not perfect, then what use is it of guidance? If it is perfect, how can you take something out because you don't like it?
Well, that got me thinking, actually. There is something called the Jefferson Bible. Thomas Jefferson, who became the third president of United States, and he wrote a Bible, and he said, let's get rid of some of these, things that are a bit controversial. And there's a Jefferson Bible, which a lot of people in America read. Is there a possibility of something like that in the foreseeable future, in your experience or your knowledge?
Well, I'm reminded of an Islamic scholar in Egypt who tried to just reverse the orders of abrogation and said the peaceful verses should abrogate the war verses. That was his intellectual argument. The response of the Muslims was to throw him out of a third-floor window and break his back. So they used a different form of logic. They used the logic of force, which Islam is quick to do. And no matter what he said, because he was trying to make a better Quran.
I mean, I find it quite difficult that in 1785 or whenever, right after the independence, I think he wrote the Jefferson Bible, if memory serves. In that time when people practiced heresy, and I believe Aaron Burr even killed Alexander Hamilton in a duel. I mean, in America, people were still having duels. I find that quite unbelievable that the Bill of Rights back in that time, when slavery was still prevalent in America, allowed him to write a Bible where he just took out a lot of stuff out of the Bible, all the horrible stuff that is written in the Bible, and I find that to be quite fascinating. But in India, someone tried. Wasim Rizvi, a Shia, he's a Shia, and he went to the Supreme Court and he said that 26 verses he wanted to be abrogated, taken out of the Quran. And the Supreme Court, what they did was they said this is a frivolous case, and they fined 50,000 rupees. And this was something unheard of. And they did not even let him present his case. I'm sure even in America, even if the case is frivolous, but not frivolous, but a serious matter which is presented towards to the Supreme Court, they will not just dismiss it instantly, but will give a fair hearing. This man was not even given a fair hearing.
Well, I used to believe that courts made their decisions entirely upon the law, but I'm an old man now, and I can tell you that judges sometimes make the decision not only based on law, but the world around them. So if making Muslim, when you go to court in America, you don't get justice, you get a legal decision. That's the best way to put it. Do you remember, have you heard of the Calcutta petition?
Yes, sir. Calcutta petition 126 verses, where the person who filed the petition wanted 126 verses to be removed from the Quran. But here it was only 26. And the Shias and the Sunnis both came together, and they just put so much pressure. And in fact, Muslims from the Modi government also were against it. And someone I know said that, even if they remove it, it's still there on the internet. But I somehow feel that if it is removed on a matter of principle, it will send a very strong signal. But I don't think that is going to happen anytime soon.
Nope.
Well, sir, are you keeping an eye on what is happening in Pakistan? I know it's a bit of a current affairs, but there is sort of like Pakistan is in a state of civil war. And I just want to ask you about the various schools of thoughts that they have in Islam. And one school of thought calls the other school of thought a kafir. Brailwi calls a Deobandi a kafir. Deobandi calls a Brailwi a kafir. A Sunni can't stand the Shia. A Shia can't stand the Sunni. I mean, how did that, these various schools, they all claim that, they have the right interpretation. So how does that work in the Islamic world? And have you studied those various schools of thoughts?
I've not made it a direct thing to study them, but I'm aware of them. Anytime you put together a set of rules, people are going to try to bend those rules and shape those rules into whatever it is they want to do, no matter what the rules are. So this is a normal behavior. I believe there are 5 schools of thought of Sharia. I'm not really sure about that. It's something like that. That's the Sunni Sharia. But as I told you earlier, I don't want to live in any part of the Sharia. But there are different Sharia schools. But these differences can sometimes be very small. For instance, when it comes to female genital mutilation, clitorectomies, there are, I know, 4 scholars who have Sharia books who say that it is recommended. The other 2 say it is mandatory. So there's a difference here, but it's a difference of how much and what degree to apply the Sharia. So we can see that there are always differences between people, no matter what it is. I mean, we have a Supreme Court in the United States whose sole job is to sort out the arguments. Both are reading the same piece of paper, but both of them have different ideas.
But I don't think, if the Quran is the final word, I don't think female genital mutilation is anywhere mentioned in the Quran. How did that creep up in all this,
It's found in the Hadith. It's found in the Hadith.
How does that matter? The Quran is the ultimate word. And
is it? Let me ask you this question. The Quran says that a Muslim is to pray 3 times a day. The Hadith says it's 5 times a day. Which do Muslims do? They do it 5 times. They do it 5 times a day. So when there's contradictions between the Quran and the Sunnah, some resolve it one way, some resolve it another. Look, human beings are a querulous lot. We like to argue, and so this is just one more thing we can argue about.
I mean, what I find fascinating is that if I can't get the answer from the Quran, I can always go on the Hadith. And if I can't get the answer from the Hadith, I can go to the Sirah and, get my way, one way or the other. But some of the things these, religious scholars say that I find that hard to believe that Prophet Muhammad would have said those words. I'm trying to say, put up a bit of a defense here that, if a man is covered in boils and if pus is coming out and the wife licks him clean, she still can't be his equal. I find such statements not believable and made up. How can they just go say such grotesquely outrageous, things? How does that even come in their minds?
There are 2 ways to study Islam. My way of studying Islam is to presume that the Quran, the Sirah, and the Hadith are accurate and true, and everything is based on them. Now, there's another way to study Islam, which is to start doing what we call a critical analysis. It is very clear to me, for instance, that the Sirah is not possible for it to be true. It's a big, thick book, some 800 pages, and nobody knows what Muhammad had for breakfast or what kind of color camel he rode. So therefore, I say that the Sirah is a human document. And I lost my train of thought there.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
Redirect me.
Those outrageous things these
yes, okay.
Islamic religious scholars would make about women and,
Right.
all
So
that.
I accept those as true. Now there's another field of criticism which says that, look, the hadith were not written down until 200 years after Muhammad died. The Sirah was written down 200 years after Muhammad died. And for that matter, the Quran itself was written some 15 years, the first copy of it, which we do not have a copy of. We find that it has been changed, obviously. But I do not presume that. I take everything as given and true. I'm like an imam in that sense. I don't criticize the doctrine in the sense of it's not true as it's written down. I know it's not true. I mean, do I believe that Muhammad is the prophet of Allah and that the Quran is a perfect document? Absolutely not. But I study it from that point. As a matter of fact, let me bring up something here. It's very hard for liberals to understand Islam because when they see things like what you're talking about, they go, oh, that could never be true. My liberal friends, when they read the Quran, when it says you can beat your wife, they'd say, oh, nobody believes that. Well, it turns out they do believe that.
If I may, even in the Bible, there are some pretty disturbing things. How long ago, since you are a Christian and you must have also studied some about Christianity, how this change, this emancipation for women started in Christianity? If you could throw some light on that.
Well, first off, I do not have a religion. I've studied Christianity. I've studied Torah, which is the Jewish scriptures. I've studied the Buddhist sutras. I've even read some Hindu works. So one of my favorite things to do is to read religious literature, religious source documents. So I can tell you first off, in the Bible, of course, there are two Bibles. There's the Old Testament, which is what the Christians call it, but the Jews call the Hebrew Bible. And then there's the New Testament. The New Testament does not have violence in it, but the Old Testament does. There's a difference, however, between the violence in the Old Testament or the Hebrew Bible and what is in the Quran and the Sirah. What is in the Sirah, the Hadith, and the Quran is prescriptive. That is, you are to do this. The violence that you see in the Hebrew Bible is a historical accounting of events. So there's a slight difference there. These are not pointed out as prescriptions, but instead it is a history of what happened.
Okay, so the Old Testament is more like a history book rather than an instructional guide, and the New Testament is sort of following the ways of life, how to go about living your life.
Yes. Now, of course, one of the things I can tell you is that anything in America you want to say about Christianity or Judaism, another Jew or Christian will argue with you about it.
Well,
if you put two Christians in the same room, you get three opinions.
Well, I often watch American, talk shows, those late night comedy shows and all that. I think Bill Maher is one of my favorite. I love
Bill
him.
Maher. I love him.
He's an atheist, but he's a straight shooter, and I believe he's one of the rare last breeds of comics who have the guts to say what they think and not become politically correct comedians. And that's where comedy goes to die. Political correctness is where comedy goes to die. That's what I believe in.
Civilizations as well.
Yes. My last question to you, Dr. Warner, is that you have a PhD in physics and mathematics. You're a man of science. What drew you towards studying religion?
Well, I was raised in a very religious household. By the time I was raised a Christian, and by the time I was 16 years old, I was teaching adult Bible class. So I found myself interested in reading, and it's just an interest that stayed with me all my life. I've never reached a conclusion about a religion that's personal, but I've studied I think I've studied every religion, including some of Sikhism. So I have a natural attraction. One of the reasons I studied Islam the second time was I was a professor and I had many Muslim students. Well, there was a subtle difference between us, the Muslims, and me, and I couldn't put my finger on it. So one of the things I say is, if you want to understand some person, it is good to study their religion if they have one. And so I was interested in studying, why are the Muslims different from the rest, from me? And so I started reading the Quran. After I read the Quran, I went, whoa, this is serious business. And then I read the Life of Mohammed. So therefore, in September, a couple of weeks before September 11, 2001, when Osama bin Laden called America to Islam, I said, oops, we're going to get whacked. How, I don't know, but we're going to. So on 9/11, I kept count. 12 different people called me on the phone to say, how did you know something was going to happen? I said, it's simple. I read the playbook. Muhammad always called his enemies to Islam before he attacked them. So therefore, the study of someone's religious doctrine helps you to understand who they are and how they work. I do the same thing with Hindus, for instance. I have some brief acquaintance with the Hindu religion. I could say almost religions. And so therefore, it helps me to understand you, for instance, better, or anybody else. So I've just had a natural attraction, because religion to me has to deal with the three great questions. Why are we here? Where are we going? And who are we? And a religion tries to answer those questions. All I care about anybody's religion is this: what kind of morals does it give them, and what kind of character does it develop? And it's for that reason that I reject Islam.
Well, sir, I think we're almost done, but I just want to ask you one question. The First Amendment, where Americans are guaranteed freedom of speech, you said you were born in a different time, you were raised in a different time, and it is not the America that you grew up. When I come back to America, do you think in the lifetime of your children, or perhaps their grandchildren, they might make certain amendments to the Bill of Rights, the First Amendment?
Well, we've already amended the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights no longer, the current interpretation is, oh yes, you have free speech, but if you offend somebody, you're causing harm. Nobody's allowed to create speech that causes harm, so therefore shut up. And it used to be that we would censor people in terms of the bias of what we reported. But now then we censor people by removing them from their platform. I do not know how many people I know who've been thrown off of YouTube, Twitter, and on and on. So now then we have the absolute form of censorship, which is, oh sure, you can go stand in your backyard and talk to your neighbor about anything you want to, but you're not allowed to put it on YouTube, you're not allowed to put it on Twitter, and you're not allowed to put it anywhere else. So therefore we have a different kind of freedom of speech. You can have free of speech as long as it does not offend a protected minority. Well, this is not free speech at all. So the United States has basically done away with freedom of speech. What's happened is we now, in America, we now live in an oligarchy. It's not a republic anymore. The amount of, what the creature called social media, which was supposed to bring us together, separates us. For instance, I'm shadow banned on YouTube. I'm shadow banned on Facebook. I'm shadow banned on Twitter.
One of my earlier Twitter accounts got suspended, and I make it a point never to use any derogatory language, or
I don't either.
Promote violence or any of that sort, and just present plain old facts. But my account got suspended. But at the same time, the Malaysian Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad actually said that about the French or something, that the Charlie Hebdo people or something like that, that they should be decapitated, and that tweet was not deleted. Twitter refused to delete that particular tweet, and I believe there is massive bias even in India. Twitter India acts quite differently with, say, someone like me, and I always believe that when there is free speech, you will not only offend the minority, you will also end up offending the majority, and you might even offend your own parents, as a matter of fact, that if they don't agree with you. So that's the price of free speech, which I'm not at any cost willing to give up. And I hope that free speech remains the way it was, because in America, because if that gets out of hand, I don't know where the world will go from there on. And right now, I feel that the left has become the Joseph McCarthy, the House of Un-American Activities. You'd be much more aware of those going. So you would have been a child at that time in the 1950s. You would have been a little boy, but still you would have studied about the House of Un-American Activities, where how people who stood up to their beliefs were hounded and their lives were ruined. And now the left is doing the same. If you don't agree with me, you are out. You don't get to sit on the chair.
I couldn't get a job anywhere in America today. I'm retired, so I have my own monies to live on, but with my record, I'm infamous. At one time, the Southern Poverty Law Center, which is a group that manufactures hate and then charges for it, said that I was one of the 10 biggest bigots in America.
Don't they know that you marched for the civil rights in the 1960s?
Doesn't matter. And the left, all you need is one thing wrong. The left preaches doctrinal purity. So you can do everything right, but as soon as you do one thing wrong they don't like, they, as we say in America, throw you under the bus.
We have a few more minutes, but I want to ask you these two questions. What if something similar of 9/11 happens again in America? What kind of response America will give? And what would have happened if something similar to 9/11 had happened, say, when Harry Truman or Eisenhower was president?
Well, the reaction would have been very different under Harry Truman. Harry Truman was a no BS kind of guy. He was a straight speaker. What he said you could believe. So it would have been a totally different reaction. If one happened now, I think, well, I can predict what would happen. No matter how big it was, the churches would say, we need to protect the mosque so that there won't be a revenge mosque burning or something.
That is fair. That is fair.
And they will also say that the real victims are the Muslims, because now then we look ill at them when we see them. So I think the response for a big jihad will be the same for a little jihad. Let me give you an example. A little jihad occurred in Boulder, Colorado, when a Muslim killed 10 people. Now, when it was first happened, he was a white guy. And so they said, oh, this is white supremacy. This is white racism. That's the reason it is. As soon as they found out he was from Syria, they shut up about all of that. And a day later in the news, this shooting just disappeared. It didn't happen.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. Actually, I wrote about that. Meena Harris, the niece of Kamala Harris, she's a liability, I tell you. She said, oh, no, seriously. I mean, she's an embarrassment. And she has Indian genes. So thing is that she said, oh, white supremacists went and, killed. At the moment it turned out, now that person may have had some serious mental health issues. I'm not going to make it a matter of religion, but for the left, the moment they realize that, okay, this guy is from Syria and he's Muslim, the news suddenly dropped out of the news cycle, the perpetual, news cycle, it completely dropped, and suddenly mental health became number one issue. And then that about gun laws. If I had been in America, I would be against the guns. I don't want automatic weapons in the hands of, common people. The militias were formed in the 1750s or after during the American independence for different reasons. I don't want civilians to have automatic weapons. Now, you and I may disagree on this, but the good thing is that we won't come to blows, literal blows on that. But it just went out of the news cycle, and she had to delete the tweet. And there were many other people who jumped on the whole Caucasian crazy white man bandwagon, and then poof, within 1 minute, the instant the name came, it all went away. And in fact, they tried to sanitize his online, his social media account. They tried to sanitize this.
Oh yes, and if he'd have killed 1,000, the result would have been the same. We don't want to offend protected minorities. Muslims are the biggest protected minority, followed by blacks in America.
I mean, I find it hard to believe that the Southern Poverty Law Center would call you a bigot when you as a white man, I'll take your word on it. When you as a white man in the South, it all happened in the South, Selma and all those places in Alabama and all that. You as a white man would probably have been more hated by your fellow white people than the black people. I mean, they were like, who is this guy who is fighting for their rights? And I find that hard to believe that Southern Poverty Law Center, which has done a lot of good things in the past, But I see in the last, after 9/11, the Southern Poverty Law Center completely changed its, attitude, its true purpose, if I may say so.
Let me give you an example. Before, at one time, my book on Sharia was the #1 bestseller on Amazon. When you did a Google search on the term political Islam, the first 4 screens were mine because I invented the term. I was selling books like crazy. I was being invited everywhere to give talks. And then in Florida, in an organization called Media Matters, it's furnished by George Soros, the Southern Poverty Law Center was the key presenter. And they said, we've tried shaming these people and calling them names, but now we must drive them out of business. Immediately, the following things happened. I was dropped off PayPal. My book disappeared on Amazon. The search for political Islam, 2/3 of those references were now gone on Google. MasterCard said I couldn't use them anymore. So these things all happened because Southern Poverty Law Center, said we need to drive these people out of business. So the Southern Poverty Law Center has created a lot of suffering in my life. And for doing what? Having a conversation just like we're having now. You see, the Southern Poverty Law Center would say that you and I are racist, hater, bigot, Islamophobes. And we shouldn't be allowed to speak because we're offending a protected minority. So let me assure you, sir, that the Southern Poverty Law Center is what Amazon and others use as for their hate certifier. And I'm certified to be a hater, so therefore, according to Amazon, I'm a hater. There is no due process in this. You can't challenge it. There's no email you can send. It's just once they make their decision, it's like the Star Chamber in Europe. It's a secret council. They make their decisions out of sight, and their decisions are executed by the state. In this case, the state is not a state as such, but instead as a business. So I'm not the only one they've done this to. As a matter of fact, I run in a circle in which most all of us have been put on the hate list by the Southern Poverty Law Center. And all of these people are honest, hardworking people who don't lie, cheat, or steal, nor hate.
I can understand. I hope freedom of speech remains in America. I hope Americans still have access to due process. Yes, sir, you wanted to say something.
Without free speech, freedom of religion means nothing. Without free speech, gun rights mean nothing. Without free speech, really nothing matters, because it's only through sharing. Remember, speech is about ideas, and nations change. Even Hinduism, which is an ancient religion, has gone through changes. So without freedom of speech, you cannot discuss change. Freedom of speech is the very essence of being a human being. It means you can be independently free. You can have your own ideas, your own thoughts, your own concepts, and present them in public to others. This is a society I want to live in. I do not want to live in a society in which you can't say that, you can't say that, you can't say that, because I will say that, no matter what you think.
I perfectly support that. I'm going to end this interview now, Dr. Warner. I want to thank you very much for coming on Bharat Vichar, giving me the opportunity to talk to you, and hopefully we'll talk again in the near future. Thank you so much for appearing on Bharat Vichar and answering all the questions as candidly and honestly as possible. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.